When you mention the name Braxton Bragg, you don't necessarily think of the most competent officer in the military. However, there was a time when Braxton Bragg was once a national hero. That time was during the Mexican War in 1840s. Bragg was a native of Warrenton, North Carolina. He'd gone to West Point. He graduated and had been commissioned in the artillery. In 1846, he commands an artillery battery in the 3rd Artillery. In 1846, when the Mexican War breaks out, Bragg and his unit are sent to Mexico as part of the army of General Zachary Taylor. Taylor will fight several battles across northern Mexico, defeats the Mexicans at just about every turn. In early 1847, the first phase of the Mexican War is winding down. The second phase of the Mexican War is going to entail creating a new army. The backbone of that army is going to be Taylor's army. Taylor will be left with a handful of troops on occupation duty in northern Mexico. The rest of his troops are going to be transferred to a new army that's forming under General Winfield Scott that will move inland against Mexico City from Veracruz on the Gulf Coast. Among the units that stay with Taylor is Braxton Bragg in the 3rd Artillery. The Mexican commander, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, gets word that Taylor's army has been weakened. Santa Anna decides now is the time to strike a decisive blow against Taylor's army and destroy it. He outnumbers Taylor better than 3 to 1. In early February, he begins his march. By the late part of the month, February 23rd, he and Taylor are about to come to blows at a little place called Buena Vista. Because Taylor's army is so badly outnumbered, Taylor uses the terrain to his advantage. He withdraws his troops into a mountain pass. He's able to deploy his troops on the high ground, commanding a narrow approach through which Santa Anna's Mexican forces have to approach. Bragg is one of a handful of artillery units that's there. Bragg also becomes the most heavily engaged unit in Taylor's army that day. He will fire an average of 250 rounds per cannon. He has 4 cannon that day. Throughout the 2-day battle, Bragg is everywhere. He has to go to the rear several times to replenish his ammunition. He comes to the front. He breaks up Mexican attack after Mexican attack. At one point towards the end of the war, Taylor and his staff are the only troops available to protect Bragg's guns. At that point, Taylor turns to Bragg and says something along the lines of, "A little more grape shot, if you please, Mr. Bragg." Bragg would later say that those were not Taylor's words. Taylor was not that calm. His exact words were not fit to be repeated here. Taylor, in the excitement of the battle, got a little bit carried away. However, it made for good headlines. That quote, "A little more grape, if you please, Mr. Bragg," appears in newspapers all across the United States. It makes national heroes of 2 men, Zachary Taylor and Braxton Bragg. So, if we were talking today in 1850, we would be talking about Braxton Bragg, American hero, instead of Braxton Bragg, the so-so Confederate general who is the namesake of Fort Bragg.